Chair of Creative Technology Innovation at UCD. That means I work across all of the faculties with 68 of the full professors who work with any kind of technology to achieve real social change. And I do that through my institute called Smart Lab and the Inclusive Design Research Centre of Ireland. Just a few weeks ago in Dublin and in Kerry and in Belfast, we ran a 12-day conference called Virtual Systems and Multimedia. It's the oldest virtual world conference in the world, funded by the IEEE and Science Foundation Ireland and a cast of thousands. The reason I'm telling you that is we brought together only a few weeks ago some of the original creators of second wave virtual reality. So I'm going to be talking about virtual worlds briefly to introduce Nikki's work and some other specific virtual world games that we do for youth and for social inclusion. But virtual worlds are one strand in a big conglomerate of technologies and tools, which include virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and also some social robotics and other things. When we use VR and augmented and mixed reality to address stigma in a classroom, kids who are being bullied, or whichever issue we're looking at, post-traumatic stress, stigma around First Nations communities, whichever community we're working in around the world, we're using these tools, but we're bearing in mind that the active agency of the community must be taken on its own terms, in its own language, with its own symbols, with its own syntax of structure, meaning, objects, etc. In the year 2000, when we won our first big multi-million project as women artists working with disadvantaged kids, we got them to include the words creativity and exclusion. And then those words became part of the keyword structures that flow down through these work package descriptions. In Framework 7, I gave the keynote, the title of which was, you must include creativity and also begin to think about diversity. So those keywords flow down. So for the past 3-4 years, we've been in the European Parliament lobbying for the word inclusion and lobbying that data science by design and all the stuff I've just said to you very quickly needs to be inverted so that the noise on the edge becomes the center of our concern. Really, really quickly to talk about empathy. So there are many definitions, lots of people talking about empathy. It's suddenly very exciting. Everybody's talking about it. Anybody who's been working in these fields, and I'm sure all of you have been aware of empathy as a concept for a long time. And when I try to explain to big multinationals why are we talking about empathy, it's easiest to go back to Montessori and simply to say she famously described the moment that a child develops empathy as the moment when the child realizes and personalizes the understanding that another child on the other side of the mountain has feelings too. It's a way of explaining that just about everybody gets. It's not nuanced. You could go on for hours about all the exceptions and why don't we define better, but just about everybody in the world understands that definition. And then we can use empathy as a missing ingredient in the global education and health technology soup. In the olden days when the guys who broke away from NASA wanted to look for UFOs and they created the SETI project, and then Bruce Damer and that gang, as part of his PhD with us, they created SETI at Home, which was just a way of convincing everybody to let them use their computer power when they're sleeping to create a collective, community-based supercomputer to map the skies for UFOs, right? So the collective awareness platform is a funding thread in Europe now. And what I'm saying here, if you're not following me, is for community groups, for anybody who's here for Games for Change, that's the strand where you'll find the most open reception to a really cool project that starts with some community need, youth work, women's issues, whatever you're working on. Those are the guys, and those guys, literally the heads of the DG, used to be the project managers for projects that many of us have been involved in. So even as humans, they understand the debates. They've been having this conversation for a long time. A teacher can use the VR headset to see if a teacher has 33 kids in a class, one of whom is severely autistic, 32 supposedly neurotypical kids of varieties, and she's trying to keep control of a classroom and make sure everybody learns something. It's hard for her to balance that, and it's hard for the kids to understand why her attention is divided, and it's hard for every individual kid in the class to understand. But the VR and AR apps can be used constructively to help everybody see from someone else's perspective. Dr. Mae Jemison, she's the first African-American woman to have gone into space. Amazing woman with amazing perspective. And we're delighted that Smart Lab is now part of her team. So Mae's project is called 100-Year Starship. And you could all be part of 100-Year Starship. So 100-Year Starship is like the Ark. It's an imagined spaceship, which probably will never be real. Maybe it will. We don't really care. But it's a concept. It's if humanity had to leave Earth, who do we need on board? What do we need on board? And so far, there are thousands of us working on this project. So Smart Lab is one of the teams in Team Empathy. We won $9 million from the European Commission 4 or 5 years ago to set up a Marie Curie program. So we hired 40 full-time postdoctoral fellows, not just we, the whole island of Ireland. So it's a consortium. The 7 universities in the south and the 2 universities in the north as an all-island initiative, hired 40 full-time postdocs to work on assistive tech, including gaming and VR, to support people with autism of all varieties and intellectual disability or cognitive difference. So they've been working for 3 or 4 years, and the interesting thing is, even though many of them started off saying, I'll work with eye-gaze control, or I'll work with brain control interfaces, or I'll work with VR, what they're all coming up with, their results, are really interestingly clustered around the impact of light, direction, sound, scent, and taste. And that sounds obvious maybe to any of you who work with people with disabilities. How to is Nikki Herbertson's, she's been introduced. So Nikki is our virtual worlds manager. She has been for 12 years now, doing a master's now, and we hope she'll then do the PhD as well. How to is her company. She set it up in outside of London to employ young people with Asperger's syndrome and other forms of autism spectrum disorder to be gainfully employed in the development and construction of virtual worlds for other people with autism. It's an amazing company. She's done amazing projects. In Ireland, we set her up because Ireland has some, Ireland Inc., as they like to call it, has some specific advantages for companies, including in the age of Brexit. She can still apply to the European Commission. So we set her up an Irish company, which is called iJazz, which in Irish Gaelic translates as how to as well.
Many people would see autistic people as being really stubborn and only focus on one thing. One of the things I had to learn was to challenge myself and to expand my skills.
Create a realistic career environment that's more interactive than chat rooms and 2D worlds, and you feel that you're more engaged with the careers advice, and I think that's what makes virtual worlds really useful.
We did a project with through Smart Lab, but we commissioned Nikki to help build us another world, which was released in the school system here in Ireland. We built it with Intel and for Intel and with the Insight Centre. And the unique thing about it, I'll only show you for 20 seconds or something, but the unique bit of it might be interesting to those of you who work in communities. What we did was hack into an open source virtual world, what's called an SSR feed, which is Social Search Recommender System feed. So that's like if you're buying something on Amazon and you bought a dress before, it will pop up and it'll say, if you liked that dress, you might like this one. Or other people who bought that book also bought this one. Kids with their teachers watching and their teachers watching the data stream were being judged on. Their grade was not based on how well they designed their eco-friendly home or how well it looked or how well they followed instructions. It was about how well they collaborated. And to collaborate, they had to multitask and not only design the world and think about both the cost and the eco rating of the gadgets that they bought for their eco home, but they also had to give advice to other people, and they did that through the SSR feed. And what we found, interestingly, and not surprisingly for those of you who work in this field, is that a lot of them were sharing all kinds of other information that was helping them bond as a group that had nothing to do with the task, but things like other guys with autism are hanging out over there, or other guys who prefer not to blah, 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 or the gals who don't like to so-and-so are over there. So they were directing themselves into rooms based on additional social information, and then the collaboration was operating in that way, and that had never been visible to the teachers before. For those of you interested in technology beyond gaming, there's a lot of interesting uses of drones as assistive tech tools now. So we're using them as buddies for kids who are being bullied, buddies for kids with autism, buddies for blind kids, like seeing eye drones. There's lots of assistive tech applications which are not just about ability and disability, but about inclusion. And we developed some for our friend here, Parik, which I'll just show you.
In a second we're going to put that headset on, and through the headset he'll be able to see what the drone is recording and showing to him live. But Paul can also, through his head movements and through his eye movements, he can control the way that the drone is flying. So he can go up and down, left and right, and basically explore the countryside around him. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, let's go, do it.
All right, are you ready? So the drone goes up, okay? So...
Wow!
Oh, look at this.
So I can turn it down.
Good
It
man.
doesn't matter what we're saying here, and we also use brain control for this. But so Parik is somebody who was hit by a car. He was left for dead. Half his skull was removed. And he's now able to fly a drone, both
Really
with
what we
eye
want to do
control
is we want to connect people with
and
severe
now with a
acquired
brain
brain
control
injuries
sensor
and
with a
not
wearable
being
device
left
that
on their
we're
own,
building with his dad
without
and this
being able to
charity.
interact
But
with their
also he
environment,
can
with other
control
people,
games, which are a way to
and take a bit
communicate
more
for
control
him.
of
So
their
there's an
life.
enormous range of stuff that people can do.